It's such a pleasure, and I'm humbled to be among you today, to be able to share our experience, but also bring that little hope of how we're able to continue, because it seems like the whole entire world is in need of this at this time. So my name is Yana Abu Taleb, and I'm from Jordan, one of 3 co-directors of a unique organization that brings together Jordanian, Israeli, Palestinian environmental peace builders, focused on promoting and conserving what's left of our shared environmental heritage. Very focused on bringing equality and a balanced share between nature and between people in our region. We have a unique methodology that we've developed over many years since we were established as an organization. So it's almost 30 years, and we've always built one objective, one program over the other. Why? Because we really have to be pragmatic and understanding of the realities on ground. So we became an organization that learns and is change-oriented, means we work together on changing the status quo. The things that in our region, between our 3 countries, have only made things worse until now on the political level. So we represent a civil society organization, but over the years we've learned that we must work using 2 approaches. We're policy change-oriented, so we have to work with decision makers in all 3 countries and through our 3 offices. And we empower decision makers by creating research altogether, research that enables decision makers and policy makers to move forward and advance issues, because it brings real-time data on ground, and it involves all 3 parties, researchers and scientists from all 3 countries. But what's more important is that we involve people in communities, people who, believe it or not, before we come into their communities, before we bring them on board and educate them, they don't know their realities. So we come into those communities and we educate the residents of those communities on issues of climate change, on issues of what their water realities are. We prepare them well on the national levels before we ask them to meet with their peers in the other countries. And when they meet, they're then shocked with so much that they don't know about the other side, but they're also shocked how much we can have in common. And they develop with us that understanding that we must cooperate. They become aware and understand that cooperation focuses on national self-interests, but mutual gains for all. And understand that without this cooperation, we're only all losing. I'm here today, coming from Jordan, crossing back from Palestine, Israel 2 weeks ago, and the reality on ground is shocking. If we really want to look at possibilities to move forward, there are very few. But since we're a change-oriented, refusing the status quo as an organization, believing as a group that we must create mutual interests, we decided that we're going to look at what's possible during these dark days. And what's possible is 2 entry points that we're working on. So back in 2020, what we did is we really looked at climate security. And we repackaged all the programs that we've been working on for many years, because our work is really challenging and not easy to advance, especially on the policy level. But we repackaged all the programs around the shared resources that we work on: the Jordan River, Dead Sea, mountain aquifer, coastal aquifer, focus on the water sector, the energy sector, the agriculture sector, and creating that nexus between them. We repackaged all the programs under climate change. But what was new in what we did in our Green-Blue deal for the Middle East, which is a vision, a better place that we want for our region, is that it brings solutions. Projects that create mutual interest and that tackle climate change, allowing us to become adaptive, allowing us to take mitigative measures, but also to become resilient altogether. So our Green-Blue deal talks about solutions that are, we phrase, in 4 components. Of course, there are many others. But the first component talks about building healthy interdependencies between our 3 countries. Talks about building on the comparative advantages of each of our countries. So taking Jordan as an example, we have a wonderful, great resource in Jordan of developing renewable energy, both solar and wind, allowing us to meet our own demands in the country from renewables, becoming climate resilient, but also to provide renewable energy to both Israel and Palestine. And not only stop there, but to the wider region as well. While if we look at the water situation in Jordan, we're in a dire situation. I can tell you that we've become number 1 in the world in terms of water scarcity. I was asked a few days back doing a podcast, Yana, what is the average of a person's share in Jordan? And I shocked them by saying that reality is it's around an average of 46 cubic meters per person per year, which is very low. But back to our water energy nexus. Since the water is scarce in the country and we're in dire need to it, we're able to exchange this renewable energy from desalinated water in Israel, where Israel has become a world leader in desalinating water on the Mediterranean and able to produce excess water, which allowed them to change their entire water economy, basically. So exchange renewable energy for water, building healthy interdependencies based on those comparative advantages. When we produced our pre-feasibility study back in 2015, it looked at the comparative advantages of all three countries. Also, bringing in Palestine to the equation, allowing Palestine with the dire situation in Gaza to be able to desalinate water on their own coast in Gaza as well. With our persistence, with our different strategies and plans, with the tense political situations, we were able to influence an MOU that has been recently signed, or a year ago about, in Sharm el-Sheikh during COP, between Jordan, Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and the US to exchange that water from Israel to Jordan. At this time, it doesn't include the Palestinians, but we, as an organization, with both our advocacy programs and our belief in the fair shares, continue to advocate for projects for the Palestinians, both renewable energy from Jordan to the West Bank and Gaza, but also for projects in Area C. So how were we able to advance? By understanding and by highlighting the self-interests of each of us under climate resilience, basically bringing in that private sector as well, that also has an economic interest in being involved in such projects. So that's one of the components. Second component talks about bringing the Jordan River, which is holy to half of humanity, not only to the people of our three countries, to become once again, in the future, a long-term vision, to become the natural water carrier for our region. But there is much to do before that. And many studies have been done, including us, as a civil society organization, working with our authorities in the three countries, producing a master plan for sustainable development in the valley. And always working on different levels with the government to advance priorities that don't need political will to advance and happen, bringing in the private sector to also engage in implementing those projects, and piloting and showcasing as well with the authorities how these projects could be implemented on ground. The third component talks about using water as a low-hanging fruit and shifting from the all or nothing mindset of wanting to solve all the final status issues between Israel and Palestine, and really focusing on water. Why? Because it can be solved. Why? Because the water economy has shifted from unilateral thinking, from each country needing to divert as much water as they can for their own use, sometimes legitimate, but not thinking of their neighbors. Not thinking that these water issues are basic human rights, and that if one country's national water security is affected, it will definitely affect the national security of all the neighboring countries. And it's something that we're working on, but working on by bringing data onto the table, by using that data to talk to both Israeli officials, to Palestinian officials, to show and model how this agreement can start and doesn't have to be a final agreement, but it can start. Education is the fourth component, and that's the most needed and powerful tool of all. You cannot believe how the young generation in Jordan, in Israel, in Palestine are eager to learn, are eager to make that change and want to work together and understand that an entry point is climate change. So we have a huge educational program working with young professionals, which we call our climate diplomats, working with school children, young people, working with educators and teachers, help them create lesson plans to properly share that information with their students. So this is all great. We have everything in one vision, in one place. But reality on ground says that nothing will move forward, especially during these difficult political times. So we as an organization decide that we need to be pragmatic, as always, but this time even more. So what we've did is we've strategized and we've looked at what we were able to advance in terms of an MOU that was signed to advance to an agreement, hopefully, of a water energy nexus, of an MOU that was signed to advance projects on ground for communities around the Jordan Valley. So we broke them into small steps, building on the partnerships that we've built for many years. So if we look at the Jordan Valley, it talks about prioritizing issues and projects around pollution control, around climate smart agriculture. So we're currently working with technical level people at the different ministries to move these issues forward. We're convening and bringing these technical level people that do not change or that are impossible to talk to or advance anything with at this time, like ministers, to help us move forward smaller level projects that are needed on ground for people. It's not an easy situation that we're in, but by being pragmatic, by identifying those urgent needs to tackle both climate security and people's needs on ground, we're able to have the group of supporters that believe and implement the projects on ground.
The project you were mentioning, Prosperity Blue, Prosperity Green, is an amazing project. But I would like to ask you about the reactions to this project in the Jordanian street. I mean, you were talking about Jordan being the #1 country in the world in scarcity of water. And you could imagine that after the agreement was signed, people will go out to the streets and praise their governments for getting the project. But they were going out to the streets to oppose the project because it was signed with Israel. And I was wondering, in your personal experience, how do you contend with the challenge of the average Jordanian not even willing to work with Israelis, even on like peaceful, beneficial projects? How do you deal with that?
So thank you, Ali. Very important question, because when the letter of intent was actually signed in the UAE between Jordan and Israel, the public opposition was tremendous in Jordan. We as a group were attacked. We had to really be very careful of who we meet, the different activities we could conduct on ground. That's reality. People are opposing of anything to do with Israel, basically. But how I as a leader of an organization that was behind such a vision, such a project, dealt with the issue, is by speaking to why this project is important, giving all those facts on ground that were not provided at the beginning by the authorities. There was no transparency, really. You could see that there were so many contradicting messages being given to the public by the different water experts and ministries. What I would do is state the facts. Facts like Jordan is facing a terrible water situation at this time, that we cannot afford to work on one solution at a time. We need to implement parallel solutions, meaning that we need to purchase this water, additional water from Israel, and it must be at something that is fair for both, at a good price for Jordan. We must work on looking how to bring in the energy needed to implement our national water carrier in Aqaba, because that's our water strategy for the country. We must work on non-revenue water, because that's where our water is lost, basically, and on looking at sustainable efforts for agriculture in the highlands. So giving out these messages was really important to have people understand the severity of the situation. Working with the authorities and with the Ministry of Water, that these messages were important. So you could see the people's perceptions of why this is an important project change over time, and you don't see that resistance anymore for the project. You still feel that there's huge opposition, but people understand why it should happen. So it's the transparency that was lacking at the beginning.
The expectation in a place like Oxford might well be that when you present reasonable, constructive, positive, mutually beneficial things, that people will say, well, that's very interesting, and let's talk about that. When you're doing it in a situation of crisis, violence, and existential threat, people do not respond necessarily in a constructive way. And so I would like to just pay tribute to yourself, and to Nadia, to Guidon, to your colleagues, because working in a situation of the kind that you're working in is genuinely extremely difficult, and it's really important that we keep giving the moral support as well as any other support we can to you as you continue to do this work.